Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode and one of the few remaining episodes of season three, Essence podcast Into the Woods, as I venture into the woods to speak to spiritual practitioners and traditional folklorists and all sorts of people in between and outside of that. And I would like to welcome today Chris Allaun. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I really hope I got your last name correct there. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, it's Alan. Yeah.
There we go. I was like with names, I always like I don't know, it's a weird thing. Weird thing. Names. I don't even know what my own name is half the time. Anyways, how are you? Welcome.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited to be here on the show. So,
Thank
yeah.
you. Yeah, I was really pleased to have you. So for those who don't know who Chris is, I think many of the tradcraft people and folkloric craft people, especially people who know Crosscrow books, will know your work. But for those who don't, Chris Allaun has been studying witchcraft, magic, and paganism since 1992. He is one of the founders and an ordained minister with the Fellowship of the Phoenix. He has been an initiate in traditional witchcraft since 2002. He's also a Native American pipe carrier and studies that path of the Red Road. He teaches classes and workshops on magic, healing, shamanism, and necromancy. He's been teaching and writing for many years and is the author of Underworld, Shamanism, Myth and Magic, Deeper into the Underworld, Death, Ancestors, and Magical Rites, and Upperworld, Shamanism and Magic of the Celestial Realms. He continues to study and teach the magical arts to those who seek to balance the three worlds in their own lives. He is also the author of the book Black Book of Jonathan Notbristle, a Devil's Parable and Guide for Witches, currently out through Crossed Crow Books. That's the reason that you're here. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you. I'm listening to you say the whole title. I'm like, it's almost like a tongue twister.
Well, I can't remember my own books like
Oh, I
subtitle
can't
half
either.
the time, so I always try to have it in front of me. But that's a beautiful, first of all, that's a beautiful title
The
for
Black Book.
really a very beautiful book. So I guess to start out our conversation today, this is a little bit of a different
Mm-hmm.
style of title than many of the other books on the market,
Yeah.
particularly around folk magic. Why this style? Why the storytelling style? Why the frame tale?
So there's two reasons. So when Blake from Crosscrow uh, um, Books, he started the publishing house, and he and I are like uh, we're very close. I love him. He loves me. I think he's great. And my house is like 3 blocks away from his office. And he actually, I reached out to him to actually present workshops in his store.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Oh my God, Chris Allen wants to do workshops." And he's one of those people. He's such a, a geek, and I love that about him. So am I. And so he would just like, "I love everything you do." Blah blah blah. And he goes, "Okay, Chris, I want you to work with us. I started a publishing company. I want you to write a book." And this was probably, I want to say, winter of 2022, and I was in the thick of a graduate program for. I was I was in school to get my um, master's and for divinity. I'm a chaplain now, and
Mm-hmm.
so I told him, I was like, I don't have time to research and do all those things because, as you know, when you write a book, between writing and researching and reading and writing and researching
Mm-hmm.
and editing, it takes about a year or so
Yeah.
to have a product. And I just didn't have the time because I'm writing term papers every 5 seconds in school.
Yes.
So 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 I told him, well, I don't have as many classes in the summer of 2022, so maybe I can do something quickly. And he was just like,
Mm.
okay. And so I decided, I was just like, what am I going to do? And one of the things that came to me is that originally folklore of witchcraft, how of the wise women and the cunning men,
Hmm.
they would teach through storytelling. They would
Hmm.
teach, oh, when this happens, let me tell you about the spell I cast, and what
Hmm.
happened, how it was successful, or how I hurt myself, or how I blew up the cauldron, or whatever. But there's always a story. And I thought, in my own spiritual path, I work a lot with the witch ancestors, and like all the time, I call them to the circle. I ask them for their magical help, and there's a few of them I work with all the time. So I said, okay. So I conjured the witch ancestors, and I said, is there anyone who wants to tell me their magical story, and I'll to write it down? And one of them came through like very, very, very strong and goes, I want you to tell my story. And so I'm from Texas. And
Mm.
so this ancestor, Jonathan, and it isn't his real name. I changed it.
Mm.
Um, because I also don't want people conjuring him thinking, oh, tell me what you told. That becomes tricky. Um, so I conjured him, and I said, okay, so tell me your story. And he did. And I wrote basically, I don't want to say word for word. He told me a story, each of the chapters with his magic and things. And the only thing I did is I helped some of the story along.
Mm.
So like for example, I may have added some drama, or maybe added some a line here or there for like dramatic effect, but the story and the subjects and everything he talks about are his. And if anyone's ever done what they call channeling, you're basically allowing the spirit just to come through and tell you these things. And
Yeah.
and for me, it was a lot of seeing Jonathan tell me this, seeing his story, having it play out in my head, in my heart, and things like that. And
Mm.
a lot of the majority of the spells I already knew, but
Mm.
a lot of them were brand new to me. And that's also how I basically had verification that, oh, this isn't just my imagination. This is actually
Right.
coming through, because some of the spells I was like, actually, that's a good spell. I wish I would have thought of that myself. Um,
Right.
and so I wrote the book, and I wanted to, and Jonathan, when he was initiated into witchcraft, it was like 1870. And so I wanted to keep that same style.
Mm.
I wanted the storytelling to be authentic to him. And so when you
Mm.
read the book, you'll see things. You'll definitely, it's a written with a Southern accent in mind.
Mm.
And so it takes the reader, I understand, a second or two to adjust their brain to read the accent. But
Mm.
once you're used to it, you adjust. But yeah, that's how it came to be. And
Wow.
and I'm actually very happy with it, because
Mm.
um, after hearing Jonathan's story, you kind of fall in love with him.
Yeah.
He's just a really interesting character. Um, One of the things I hear all the time is that, especially for people who are starting off um, in witchcraft, is he tells you what he was thinking. And a
Mm.
lot of how-to books, they say, this is how you cast a circle. This is how
Mm.
you light the candle. But they don't tell you how they're feeling, what they're thinking,
Mm.
um, their hopes, their dreams, their fears. And Jonathan
Mm.
does that. He says, oh my God, I'm scared to death. I'm
Mm.
going to conjure this anyway. And
Right. Right.
yeah, I've heard of a lot of people tell me how that's helped them, you know.
Mm. I noticed that Ivo Dominguez, who wrote the forward for the book,
Hmm.
somewhere in there he suggested not just reading
Mm-hmm.
the book, but traveling through, that it's a
Hmm.
landscape to travel through. If somebody is in Texas like watching this and they're recognizing the physical landscape of this book in their own backyard, what would or even outside if people are anywhere in the world, what frame of mind do you suggest people have when they're first starting to get into this book? Because reading fiction, everybody has a certain way of approaching fiction. Reading nonfiction, everybody has a certain way of
Yeah,
approaching nonfiction. This is kind of in between there, right? This
right.
is written in that storyteller mode.
Hmm.
What would your recommendations be?
So, you know, I would say, and how I actually um, wrote it and listened to Jonathan as a teacher. You
Mm-hmm.
know, he is, I saw him in his 70s on a rocking chair with a tobacco pipe and a shot of whiskey, just rocking back and forth, telling his story. But I was also transported into the stories. Like I would
Mm-hmm.
see it in my head, and it's almost like you become Jonathan, like you are
Right.
Jonathan. You connect with Jonathan, or you're along for the ride, you know.
Mm.
Um, One of the things that kind of stood out to me is like how Jonathan tells a story. Like
Mm.
I can smell uh,
Right.
the tobacco. I can hear him um, rock back and forth on the chair. I can um, see him with a book, going through the book and hearing the pages and things like that. So there's a lot of the five senses,
Right.
in
Right.
there. So I would say just uh, let Jonathan tell you his story and enjoy the ride.
Mm. It almost reminds me of um, like Carlos Castaneda, that whole journey of Don Juan, even though I mean we're not going to compare the two, obviously we're not comparing the two, but I mean reading that for the first time without really knowing the backstory to Carlos Castaneda, there was that invitation to experience and with the five senses and maybe the six senses too. What, as you were writing this, as you were downloading, well, let me ask you, what was that process like? Was it like a download? Was it a vision? Was it a how was this information coming to you?
So I have so normally when I'm doing a magical practice or ceremony, I just call the spirits. But for special things, I have a little cauldron
Hmm.
that has certain ingredients that have resonate with the witch ancestors, like for certain special things in the cauldron that
Hmm.
create a portal or create a doorway. And so I would light a candle, I would call to him, light the incense, open up the cauldron and say, come through. And then I would just open up my heart, open up my mind, and let whatever came through come through. And the thing about mm, the witch ancestors I work with, they're very strong, but they're gentle,
Mm.
almost like protective teachers. Like you feel them, but it doesn't feel aggressive. It doesn't feel like, let me tell you. It feels like, let me help you. Let me teach you. And it feels a lot like that. And so I would just feel him, and
Mm.
and it came through, and I wrote the entire book in 6 weeks.
Wow.
I wrote the entire thing in 6 weeks, and it
Mm.
wasn't every day. It was a couple hours a day, if that.
Hmm.
it just came through. It
Yeah.
was simple, and probably is because I was open to it.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
I wasn't like, prove to me you're real. I was like, hey,
Yeah.
whatever happens, happens, and I'm just
Right.
gonna allow the flow. And it was strong, but I also had a working relationship with these spirits beforehand, so it wasn't like brand new.
Yeah.
Because I could call them into my magical practices, into
Mm.
my astral projections, my flying journeys, whatever you want to call it. I give them offerings all the time, so we have a
Mm.
relationship. So
I love that. I love that. So I have to ask
yeah.
because having gone through an editing process myself, and it was just me. I mean, like my ancestors may have had a hand in it. I think by
Mm.
then they were sick of talking about ancestors with me. But I'm curious for you then, because like when you speak to other people who have downloaded information or who've channeled information, or the information's come out in such an ecstatic way, and
Mm.
it sounds like after 6 weeks it just what was it like then going into the editing process where it's more of a line by line rationalistic thinking, looking at all the pieces? It isn't that download anymore. What, well, or was it like? What was that like for you?
Um, so because I think this is a book number, what, seven, six, seven.
Mhm.
I've done the editing a process, and it's tedious and it's painful and it hurts me. But um,
I feel that.
you know, one of the things that was so easy about the editing process is I wanted to keep Jonathan's grammar how he spoke. So, if even today, and I grew up in of way deep in the south of Texas, so that's a thick accent, and the grammar is its own thing, and I wanted to be authentic to that. So we didn't have a whole lot of editing. Some because I told the editor at the time. I said, if it doesn't make sense, we can flesh it out, but let's try to keep it authentic. So it didn't have a whole lot of editing, but I have to say, I really enjoyed Jonathan's stories. So reading them again and again and again was fun.
Yeah,
Like I enjoyed it. I'll say like, and I'm sure you've had the same experience. Like when I research something and write a book, and it takes you a year or two,
mhm,
you get tired of reading your own book.
totally. Yeah,
And the
absolutely.
reason editor is so important is because after you've read a chapter 17 times, your brain skips over the mistakes
Absolutely.
or the typos or whatever it is. Um, and so an editor has a fresh eye, and I appreciate that. But with Jonathan, we didn't have to do a whole lot. It was almost like, here you go.
Mm,
And that's basically it. But the editor was helpful because she helped me stay on task. She asked a lot of questions about what is Jonathan trying to say? What does it look like? How should it sound? How should it feel?
mm,
And I was actually impressed because I've never had an editor ask me those questions before. So
yeah.
it was fun.
Yeah, those are important questions, right? I'm sure the questions that a lot of readers will be asking too, especially if they're inserting themselves into the story or going along the journey with Jonathan. Absolutely. How did your relationship change with him then? After going through this whole process, getting this
Oh,
book
oh,
out
I
there, and
love him.
now.
I love him. I
Yeah,
love Jonathan. Like
yeah.
he has a special place in my heart. I think he's
Hmm.
great. I consider him a teacher.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I just, I've heard about authors how, or like on TV shows or movies, how you fall in love with a character. And it's true, you do. You fall in love with them.
Mm.
And um, yeah, yeah, people keep asking me for a direct sequel. And I keep saying um, that's a strong possibility because I would love. So the book is written in the first year of Jonathan's journey into witchcraft. He still has several more years, and we'll have to see about that.
Mm. I guess it would come down to timing, would it?
So it comes down to two things. It comes
Mm.
down to I don't like to repeat myself very often.
Right.
And the other thing is that I mean I can find the time, I suppose. I think for Jonathan, it's why are we telling the story? Why?
Mm. Mm.
You know, the first year of Jonathan's story, I think is important because we've all had our first year. We all know what that feels like. The excitement, the fear, the am I doing it right? And then you have the dreams and then the spells, whatever. We all know what that's like.
Mm.
And so to have that first year is a good teaching process. But um, you know, I can see Jonathan sharing stories because in the book he's only like 15 years old. He's
Wow.
only
Yes. Hmm.
he's only 15. So I can see him in his 40s or his 70s,
Mm.
which you know, I'm 48 years old. Who I was at 20 is not who I am now
Yeah.
at all.
Very
I
much
mean, not
so.
my core and my soul is the same, but how I think and how I see the world's completely different.
Totally.
So it'd be fun to see how Jonathan teaches, you
Yeah.
know. And I also have this fear though. I probably shouldn't, but I kind of do. I feel like whenever I write something advanced, people either question it so much or people think, oh, because it hasn't happened to me, it can't be true. And
Right.
so, like, whenever I put advanced practices in some of my other books, you just get criticism. So I kind of understand. You hear all the time, so why don't such and such publishers have advanced books?
Mm.
Well, because, well, two reasons. People question it.
Hmm.
And the other reason is that when a witch becomes advanced, they have their own personal practice, and so they don't need the
It's
books
true.
anymore. However, I
Absolutely, it's
will,
true.
yeah, it is true.
Yeah.
I will say though, I'm one of those people. I think young authors actually have something to teach as older folks.
Hmm.
So I'd love to read someone who's um, like Keldon. I love Keldon. I think he's
Hmm.
fabulous. Keldon is, I think he's in his 20s, his young 20s, and I think he's brilliant. And he and I have some of the same magical practices,
Hmm.
and can by accident. And I like a different point of view. So yes, so there's that. So long story
Yeah.
short.
No, I really hear you. I think this is the thing. I feel like I, I've chatted with a lot of my other guests on this podcast. If you haven't had a chance to see many of the other guests, most of them are in the folkloric traditional craft kind of circuit. I've got Keldon coming on next season, for example. A lot of the others are, a lot of them tend to be the queer, male, or trans mask practitioners of a certain
Have you
age. A
noticed?
lot of us, yeah, right, all bearded, all, So, but it's interesting because I feel like there's a certain cohort of writers right now that are in their kind of early 30s to late 40s, kind of within that time zone, right? And I
Mhm.
feel like we have so many others who are coming up in their 20s, their early 20s, particularly. I'm noticing a lot who, we've paved the way for them to be able to not only be out in the crowd, but
Absolutely.
also experience. And I feel like they bring that vitality that we weren't allowed to have necessarily. I mean, well, I say we. I mean, I'm pretty vital, I think. but it is
You're
one of
so
those
funny.
things, you know. It's one of those things, you know. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to see kind of what the future will come, you know.
So it's interesting when it comes to young people because I think, like with anything, you need to tell your experience. And
Hmm.
so, like with Jonathan, Jonathan tells the story of his
Hmm.
first year into witchcraft and what that's like
Hmm.
for him because it's
Hmm.
informative. Um, I think we have to be careful of, I have a theory about the patriarchy, and the patriarchy loves young and pretty, and
Hmm.
I like young and pretty. I do, but I don't idolize it. I don't think it's the only way to go. And my only thing about that is I want to be careful that whoever we were having speak and teach and
Hmm.
write have something to say. But I also think it's up to us older people to teach them how to have a voice. What does that voice
Hmm.
look like? And to be responsible because I'm sure you heard about it. There was an author with Wisner who wrote a book and she was in her early 20s and it turns out that she was hanging out with the Nazis. And they rightly so, were like, no, we have a zero tolerance for that. And someone said, well, maybe she didn't understand or didn't know because she's so young. And I'm just
Mm.
like, I think we
Mm.
can do, I think we can do
She's not
better
that
than
young,
that.
to be honest. She's not that young.
Well, I think we can do better than that. And I
Mm.
do think that we need to promote young people, help them and teach them and guide them. Um, One of the things that I often criticize is that um, when you look at Instagram and TikTok and you see people who are only into witchcraft and spirituality, ironically, spirituality, to become famous or whatever, and it's all uh, narcissism.
Mm.
Um, I often think that they don't have good teachers around
Right.
them because
Right.
I was an issue. I started this path when I was 17. I had my first teacher when I was like 24,
Mm.
25. And yeah, I was a 24-year-old.
Hmm.
I'm not just loud and said things I
Right.
shouldn't, but I had teachers well, who, who has, who taught me discipline, who said,
Hmm.
oh, you can't just say everything you think. Oh, you have to be respectful. Let me show you what
Yes.
this looks like. Here's how you respect the spirits. Here's how you respect yourself. Here's how
Yeah.
you have a voice. Here's how you find that thing inside your soul, yourself, in order to have a voice. So
Mm.
I often think that those people don't have teachers, and that makes me sad because I think teachers are important.
Absolutely. I completely agree. It's funny. I was chatting with Devin Hunter a few episodes ago. Or no, it was on his podcast. We were chatting about kind of what it was like 20 years ago. 'Cause we all came onto the scene about 20 years ago. I know you came
Yeah.
on 10 years
Way
prior to
before
that, but
that.
yeah. But like we still within that same generation, pre-internet, kind of early
Hmm.
internet, right? And
Yeah.
we were chatting. He was saying how he wrote a book at 19 and
Hmm.
how he is so glad that that wasn't published because he's really come on from that. But I think that that's a very natural part of not only growing in age but also growing in self too. We're
Right.
always looking back at our cringy, angsty other versions. For me, I was an angsty person about 3 years ago, right? Constantly looking
I'm
back,
still
right?
angsty. What are you talking
It's
about?
wonderful, isn't it? But I think that that is part of that growth, and what I love about, I guess what I love about seeing kind of newer people to the craft, not even just around age, but newer people to the craft, is that they remind me of where I was, the questions I was asking. I was thinking about this the other
Right.
day when I was teaching. I have somebody in one of the classes I'm teaching, and he's really new on his journey. And to me, I'm like, oh, this is old hat. I just like show up, drinking coffee, like, let's talk about this, right? And I'm like seeing in his face where I was 20 years ago. And I'm like, shit, I have
Wow.
a big responsibility here that I need to honor this person's earnestness and endearment and like real love of what he's hearing, right? I need to be very responsible right now in how I not only treat that but cater to that. And I think that is well stepping into being a teacher, right?
Well, one of the things I noticed so when I first got into witchcraft, I was 16 or 17 years old.
Mhm.
And I remember that excitement, exactly what you said. And I was never scared of it.
Mhm.
I'm one of those people, I don't have a whole lot of fear. I'm grumpy, but I don't have a lot of
Right.
fear, like I'm whatever. But I remember just having that, okay, I got my first candles and we didn't have oils. You went to the store and got extra virgin olive oil and the cheap dollar incense. And I remember just smelling that cheap incense and the olive oil, anointing the candles out of a spell book I had. I felt so powerful and visceral. And speaking of all five senses, and I could just smell it, I could hear it, I could feel it. And those spells were powerful, like
Yeah.
holy crap.
Yeah.
And so when I was in I want to say my 30s, all my spells always worked.
Mm.
But I didn't have that
Yes.
in it. And
Yes.
so I spent a lot of time in my 40s
Mm.
learning from younger people to have that excitement and again. So that's
Mm.
why I've been doing this for 30, oh God, 32 years almost. And I'm starting to take classes
Mm.
from other teachers, not because I don't know something, but because I want to hear their point of view. What's their take on it?
Mhm.
And so I want to become inspired again. And
Yes.
so, to be honest, one of the things about Jonathan
Mm.
and the book is that it was inspiring. Like every chapter I
Mm.
wrote, I was inspired by it. I was just like,
Mhm.
this is really cool. Um, and Jonathan was excited, and I was sharing that excitement with him, and I was just like, "Wow, this is really rekindling
Mm.
my I don't want to say vitality, but my 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 energy, my that that
The
you know
enthusiasm, right? Mm.
exactly
Yeah.
the how you do some. Have you ever had the experience to where something happens and you're like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna cast a spell, God damn it,"
Mhm.
and you don't
Mhm.
even think about it, you don't do any research, you just find a
Mhm.
candle, throw
You
down
just do it.
fire, throw
Mhm.
down oil, and before you light the flame, because you're so in it, it's already happened, it's already
Mhm.
manifested. And I'm like, well, let me still cast this spell because that's
Right.
what you do. That's the thing I am trying to remember or to initiate into myself and teach all my students that and
Mm.
stuff. Um, I think Jonathan does that pretty well.
Mm.
Partly it's because, there are many times that he's like, holy shit,
Right.
what the hell just happened? Or or I'm in the presence of a dark spirit. Holy shit, I have to
Mm.
go talk to her. I'm scared to death. And he had excitement and it makes his magic powerful. It's kind of like,
Mm.
how you're scared and the adrenaline goes, or you're
Totally. Yeah.
excited and the adrenaline goes. So like, I want to capture that so
Right.
that every time we cast a spell, it's just powerful.
It's in the moment. It's reactive. It's doing it, right? Actually,
Right,
instead of just thinking it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I
right.
know
It's
that
that
feeling
whole,
well.
well, my personal practice, I do a lot of ecstatic uh, techniques. So like breathing and summoning energies from the earth and dancing and drumming and
Hmm.
and like like I said in the biography, I've worked a lot with the Lakota community,
Hmm.
and when you sing with your whole self, you sing with your spirit,
Hmm.
and so when you're um, conjuring magic,
Mm.
it's not just in your head. I mean, like candle, it's a whole physical experience, and then that weaves into your astral experience, which weaves into your spiritual experience, which weaves
Mm.
into your your energy.
Mm.
In my own
Mhm.
private circles, I have to warn brand new people that okay, we're gonna grab our staffs, our brooms, and our sting. We're gonna shake, we're gonna dance and scream, and it won't be like, oh, light the candle, throw down the herb. No, scream at the moon. We're gonna scream at the moon.
Yeah.
And then they're like, wow, that was a lot, but powerful. I'm like, yeah, because you always scream at the moon.
Well, it's that removal from this space, right? It's
Mhm.
moving into into just being in the moment. And that's where that liminal space is being in the moment, isn't it? And I noticed throughout the book, like every time I kind of checked in where Jonathan was, he was just in the moment. I'm trying to think there was and you'll have to forgive me. This stack of books next to me is just muddling everything. But there's a moment that he meets the king and the queen of the woods,
Oh,
Arfio,
fairies. He meets the
fairies.
queen and king of the fairies.
That's it. And there's a
Yeah.
moment, and I like this really just struck out at me. And he said, I kept looking at them and I couldn't take my eyes off them.
Hmm.
Being in the moment, just struck by what was happening in front of him, just in the moment. And I think that that's really the big point, being in the moment, because that's where the possibility happens, right? That's the quintessential moment of the weaving of the tapestry, right?
Hmm. The weaving of the magic of fate, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that particular, I mean, all the chapters, but that particular chapter was interesting because Jonathan was showing me, telling me whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that he was in the fairy kingdom.
Yeah.
He was in the other world, and it has no time or space, or time is skewed,
Mm-hmm.
and it also has a very fluid way, and when the reader reads the whole story, you'll
Mm-hmm.
see, oh, fluid in more ways than one.
Yeah.
um, and it about being in the moment. It's the only way I go to describe it to someone is, especially at Samhain, we're at Samhain time right now. When you're doing a sound ritual, you
Mm-hmm.
bring out the cauldron and you turn off the lights and you shut the curtain and you bring out whatever, a skull or whatever, and everything stops except that magic what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like there's no time and no space. And yeah, it's Samhain, and that's the thing. But you're it's I don't even want to say you're focused because it doesn't feel like a
Yeah.
mental thing. It's almost like your whole self is connecting to whatever you're doing at that time.
Mm-hmm. It's true. No, it's true. And it's like what we were saying before, that idea of like, you can hear your drum, like you just go into that shock place, that just in the
Hmm.
moment, like yeah, it's something palpable. It's something palpable. And I feel like that is kind of bringing it back to that idea of age. The older we get, the less we're able to go into that place because we're constantly up here, all the worries, all the fears, all the, and I think in truth, that's where the newcomers to these traditions kind of hold the key because it's new to them. It's exciting to them. It's that moment
Hmm.
of exploration for them, right? That initiating us back
Yeah.
into where we were, right?
Oh, I'm glad you said that. We initiate them into the histories, the deeper magic, and they initiate us into that place of just being connected, of being
Mm,
part of everything. You know, one of the things that um, I appreciate about young people, you know, it's interesting now that I'm, you know, a 48-year-old gay man. I find that a lot of people my own age kind of, for lack of a better word, boring, you know, because you know, I'm ecstatic, and so I like to dance. I like DJs. I like moving around. Is probably my ADHD, but whatever. And so I like just being part of a culture and being
Hmm.
part of the zeitgeist, um and all those things. I noticed that older people, like over 40 or whatever, they all tend to, you know, like hibernate or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I get the whole being tired, and a lot of people over 40 have a partner or a husband or a wife or whatever. But I feel like, you know, for one of my close friends is the author Michael Hercus, who's the glam witch, and he he inspires me because he's always doing something, and always is about being seen and being glamorous and being loud, and your entire self. And I like that because it reminds me to be my authentic self, to find that excitement someplace, you know. And so, and the thing is like he teases me, because he's like, oh, all those dark spirits. So that's Chris's thing. I was like, step into my parlor. Let me show you about spirits. And so, you know, you teach the young teach you, you know.
Well, I was going to say how many of the younger witches out there, especially the gay male ones, who are you know, doing interesting thing with dark spirits in dark corners, right?
Well, you know, I actually asked my teacher a long time ago, why is it that gay men are all about dark goddesses
Mm,
and things like that, and the dark and creepy things. And you know, part of it is just, you know, I think being gay, like we we gravitate towards icons, right? We gravitate towards strong feminine, beings, like, you know, Lady Gaga or Madonna or Cher or whoever. We like that, and
mm,
even in fashion or art, we like the strong, domineering female. And I think that
mm,
part of it is that we have female energies and we have masculine energies. So
mm,
if we're attracted to females who have a strong feminine, but a strong masculine energy. Now superimpose that same idea to gods and goddesses. Well, who is that? Dark goddesses. And so we
right.
love our dark goddesses. And I just saw something where one of like RuPaul's drag queens was just like, what is it with gay people in horror film?
Yeah.
We like our ghosts and blood and guts and psychos and demons and vampires. We just
Mm,
do. And part of it is I personally, so I was told, and I'm not sure how true I think this is. I was told it's because a lot of us grow up with like a lot of like trauma, or being
mhm.
teased or bullied because we're gay.
Yeah.
I actually think it's because we have both male, strong feminine energies and strong male energies,
Mm,
and because of that, we have a tendency to be more spiritual. You know,
mm,
you know, a lot of the shamans, the Siberian shamans, they would cross dress, they would
mm,
do things inside out or backwards so that they can train themselves and go
mhm.
into the other world. So I think
Absolutely.
that gay men have the natural ability
Mm,
to, with their energies, and go into the other world. Now, that's not to say that straight men can't do it and straight
mm,
women can't do it. Of course they can.
mm,
Um, I think that a lot of straight and they do it differently.
yes.
Um, but for us, it's all about, you know, Hecate, Diana, Isis, strong,
Yeah.
you know, Oregon, things like that, that strong feminine figure, because that's who we want to be, you know.
Mm. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that, to be honest. I hear what you're saying. No, I hear what you're saying. I certainly have ideas on that, but I think that those strong, powerful I think it's very complex. I certainly think what you're saying is true, and I think that those are strands to it. But I also wonder, like, I know that there's a big push within particularly tradcraft communities and folkloric craft communities of really connecting in like with the folk devil as a sexual being of masculinity and whatnot. I know in Chicago there you've got people like, well, you used to have people like Jeff Cullen. I know they've moved now, but
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
that whole tradition there, the sabbatic, like very hypersexual and empowerment in sexuality. So I think that there's trends in that, definitely. I think that,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, hmm
One of
so many pieces.
the things that the very first thing that happens to Jonathan is that when he meets the devil himself,
Hmm.
he gives him a kiss,
Yeah.
and it's very erotic. You know, when it comes to the devil and things like that, and I think people now we're talking about the folklore
Hmm.
devil and not Satan, that you know we're on the fringes
Hmm.
as gay men,
Absolutely.
and
That's it.
so we like things that are fringy. We like
Yeah.
leather. We like art. We like dance music. We like rock and roll. We like whatever. And so in that regard, I can see it how it superimposes on our
Hmm.
gods and goddesses. But also, I think that a lot of us are attracted to the bad boy. That
Hmm. Absolutely.
I've never been attracted to like the leather biker guy, but I can understand the appeal. You know,
Hmm.
um, I thankfully, I've grown out of the whole, oh, I'm only attracted to guys who are, big and scruffy and ride a motorcycle and they can't hold on a job if they can fucking stupid.
Right.
Um, I think having a home and having a job is very sexy, actually. Um,
Hmm.
but when we talk about sexual fantasies,
Hmm.
I think there's a lot to be said about the dark and the shadow of our mind and where there's magical powers in sexuality, especially the taboo. One of the things I studied
Absolutely.
was sexual tantra, and
Hmm.
one of I am not an expert on this, but one of the things I found in my research, which I resonate with, is that in sexual tantra, you, you find spiritual power in breaking
Yeah.
taboo.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
so homosexual sex, or leather, or or fetish, or whatever, and there's
Yeah.
power there. In fact, in tradcraft, I was taught it, and I don't put this in my own personal practice, but I was taught that one of the best ways to put yourself into that deep magical place is through sexual stimulation of some sort. It
Mm.
could be either
Mm.
masturbation or sex magic
Hmm.
or erotic fantasy or whatever, because the idea is when you're sexually stimulated, it really supercharges the energies in your body, which in turn supercharges the
Hmm.
magical energy. And I wonder how much, I think we could have
Yeah,
a
totally.
whole
No,
show
I
on just that.
completely have a
You
conversation about
know,
that. Yeah.
um,
It's funny though, because I feel like that piece can often be misinterpreted because I mean in a cult community like co-etting, for example, right? And that whole shebang around kind of over what am I trying to say? Overemphasizing the sex piece versus the energy piece to that.
Right.
Um, you know,
I have judgments.
yeah, I have judgments too. I
I
do.
have strong judgments.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I, I, I don't. How do I say this? Um, one of the things I will always say is whatever makes someone feel sacred and powerful, I will always support that.
Yeah.
However, I strongly believe in consent. I also
Absolutely.
believe that you don't have to be sexual full to be a witch or to be
Mhm.
powerful. And no, ancient witches were not always sky clad, so we need to stop that. Um, you know, yes, some of the Greeks, which is for, but it's hot in Greece in July
This is the thing. Yeah.
versus Britain in January. You know,
Mhm.
um, one of the things that I think we need to have more conversations, and there is some conversation about the predatory behavior of some
Mhm.
magical people and some magical
Mhm.
groups. I don't think it's appropriate that to be, and I don't care if I get hate on this, I'm just going to say it. I don't think it's appropriate to force your initiate to have a sexual initiation. I
Mhm.
don't think it's appropriate in any way, shape, or form. I do think if that's your thing and you're like, I'm cool with it, I am here
Mhm.
for it, great. Have that, enjoy it, have the sacred because sex is sacred. But
Absolutely, it is.
if I'm a high priest or a spiritual leader and I say, oh, to make you a priestess or another priest, you have to have sex with me. I think that's a problem. If the other person goes, nope, I'm into it. Okay, great, then it's fine. You
It's a
know,
consensual thing. Absolutely. It's a consensual
exactly,
thing.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. It does raise, I mean, well, I don't even know where this conversation is heading, but it's going
I
somewhere.
know.
I had Lee Morgan on a couple, I think by the time this episode comes out, I think Lee's is just before yours.
Okay.
So last week, well, practically last week. And we were talking about that idea of taboo. We were talking about,
Mhm.
particularly, I don't know if you, do you know Lee Morgan's works?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
love Lee Morgan. So their recent one that just came out is all about cannibalism and the idea of cannibalism and connect as its connection to witchcraft in various like societies from an anthropological point of view. But it's
Mhm.
really about that idea of stepping into taboo, not becoming a cannibal, just saying not becoming cannibal, but
Okay. I read
that
the book, so
oh, there you go. Okay. So you
I,
know what I mean. And
yeah,
if
yeah.
people are listening to this now, they need to have gone out and got Lee's book because it's really, really good too.
No,
But
it's
but that's
really good.
oh, I loved it. It was so good. I was very lucky to have an advanced
So I'm
reader
going to
as
tell you a
well.
secret. I'm going to tell you a secret. I don't know how much you know about initiatory traditional craft and stuff like that,
Hmm.
but it is one of the few books that's really open and a forthcoming about the traditional craft mysteries.
Hmm.
It's a lot of the books I've seen, including some of my own, just kind of dabble into the mysteries. He goes for it.
Mm.
He goes for the mysteries, and I wrote a blurb actually for the book, and I said, you know what, you get it. And
Mm.
so we started talking about it, and he was just like, you and I need to have more conversations because I think we're talking about the same thing. And I said, I think we are. So I highly recommend that book
Really good. It's
tremendously.
really good. It's really good.
Yeah,
What I find interesting though, like so I had Theo Gade Parma on for the next season, so just
yeah.
recording. So anyways, I'm seeing kind of there's a trend that's moving through a lot of the published books in the past year and a half, I would say. There seems to be a trend again of that coming back to self, coming back to
Mhm.
story, coming back to creating new reality, not getting locked in the reality of the past. And it
Right.
sounds like that is a real trend in your book too. Would you say that's true?
So, absolutely. However,
Mm,
it was all cool right by accident. So I
nice.
wasn't trying to do something new. I wasn't trying to like come back to self. I think it just happened. I think
Mm,
To be honest, I think I'm in tune to what's happening around me. And all those
Mm,
authors I'm friends with. I
yeah,
know them. I
same here.
wouldn't say we're close or anything, but
Yes.
I know them. I've Theo I've spent a lot of time with, like a lot of time
Hmm.
with in Chicago. So I wonder if, if we share the same philosophies or the same ways
Hmm.
of doing things. But one of the things that I think is important is we need to honor our magical past, but pave the way for a new future, you know?
Hmm. Absolutely.
Like I like my cauldrons and my brooms and my skulls. I'm not throwing that away, but I don't think we still the whole search that we used to do. I want to find that true ancient magical spell book. There's no such thing as that true magical spell book, and it's fiction. However, I mean there are some grim wars and things like that. But instead of trying to find the old, we're taking old traditions and we're creating something brand new,
Yeah.
which is ironic, despite the fact that Jonathan's story takes place in 1870.
Well, but I think that that's a really important point. A lot of the guests that I've had on, people like, for example, Brandon Weston or any of the other writers who are speaking about like Appalachian tradition or Texas tradition or any of the New World traditions, and in the Old World too. A lot of the speakers and writers I've been chatting to over there, it's about how to bring these traditions out of those folklore books that are
Right,
written by outsiders and bring them into now, right? We're not being caught in those old time mentalities of the 1800s. We're living
right.
it now, right? And that's really, I
Right.
think, what I'm noticing, at least on Facebook groups, having said to you before we even started recording that I'm not on Facebook groups anymore, what I am noticing on some of them that I'm on is that people are starting to ask that question of, am I allowed less and less and less?
Mm,
Because they're now living it's a living practice. That's one of the big things in my own book that I really promote is make your living practice now, grounded in now, with roots
mhm.
going back, yes. But when
Yeah.
you live a practice now, you have the ability to make those decisions for yourself. You're not asking permission to do something.
Well, see, that's the thing. So even in folkloric witchcraft and traditional witchcraft or whatever, um, at that time, it was a modern practice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you use a cauldron and the broom, the reason you use the cauldron is because that's what you had to cook with.
What you had, yeah.
That was a modern
Mm-hmm.
technology. So when people say, "Oh, you can't use the microwave," yes, you can. You
Right.
can't use the freezer. Yes, you can.
Yes, you can,
Um,
yeah.
I was told so I grind all my herbs in a coffee grinder. Someone goes, "Well, that's not traditional." I'm like, trust me, if witches 300 years ago had a coffee grinder, they'd
Mm-hmm.
use it. So why can't
Yeah.
we?
Well,
You
this is
know,
the thing. This is the thing. And this is then when it becomes a, grounding in your own living practice. I remember years ago, back in the like mid 2010s, right? 2015 or something like that. I was on a hoodoo group, right? And I'm not on many of those now because they don't offer me much,
reasons.
Yes, reasons, right?
Because reasons.
Bigger reasons. But this woman came on, and she was so earnest, and she was so, and she, a middle-aged woman, and she showed a picture of her stove, and she had an altar built onto her stove that she would take down when she was cooking, and the
Perfect.
flack that she got from that, and I looked at it, and I suddenly had this big like feeling, even before I really knew anything about hoodoo or anything about kind of living my own practice because I was on my own journey back then. But I thought, this is so wonderful. This is so genius. And she was so earnestly like, oh yeah, this is my altar, and this is, and she had all like paper mache stuff, whatever. Like it was
I
a
love it.
flaming nightmare, but it was beautiful. And that really, I always remember that direct picture because it was like something clicked for me when I saw that. And it was like, oh, okay. something moving along. And like in truth, she was very new to her practice, I think, and that was all she had. But the flack that she was getting from that, people were shaming her, horrific things. But there
Well,
was also that current, Sorry, go on.
you well, two things. The first thing is when I turn on my gas in a Nuku place,
Mhm.
I conjure the hearth spirits to come
Mhm.
to the stove.
Yeah,
So I'm glad she did that. That's fantastic. That's
yeah.
also going back to what you said before at the beginning about how brand new practitioners teach us,
Mhm.
right? They teach
Absolutely.
us. And the other thing is, I was always told that you can't use, artificial scents and oils. You can't use a plastic god or goddess because it's not natural. All those things are incorrect. So
Mhm.
for the reason I know that, well, you probably know this too, in Santeria, in some voodoo practices, there's plastic all over the place. And some of the most uh, powerful ceremonies I've seen had plastic cups, plastic crosses,
Mhm.
plastic saints, and I even saw one that had electric candles.
Mhm.
So so all that says to me, however you feel the magic, however you feel the power, however you feel uh the flow of energy,
Mm.
do that.
Yes.
So if it's
Yes.
a cauldron
This is
or
the
if it's a
thing.
stove, it doesn't matter. Or if it's a
Yeah.
microwave or a plastic Jesus, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Just whatever you feel is magical.
I love that. I
Because it's
think
all
that's
like tools anyway.
Hmm?
It's all tools anyway.
This is the thing,
You're the
right?
magic.
This is the thing. And your relationship to those tools, right? Absolutely. I think that's probably a good place to end because I don't know where else this conversation could go. It could last
I can
another
do this
few
all night
hours.
long.
This has been an absolute pleasure, Chris. I was
Yeah, it's
really looking
fun.
forward to having you on. Yeah. So you've this is coming out mid December. What do you have going on? Do you have anything you'd like to promote other than the book?
I don't because I have a brand new book coming out for next Halloween. I can't say too much about it until I
Hmm.
get the green light. And I'm focusing on the Fellowship of the Phoenix and my own traditional craft circle and stuff like that. And so I'm not even teaching a whole lot anymore because I need a break here and there. I need a
No, I
minute.
hear you. Oh, I hear you. I hear you. That being said, though, you've got. Are you still doing your? Is it weekly or monthly Zoom gatherings, or is that over now?
Um, the Are you talking about the Mystic Chat and my
Yes,
show
the
I
Mystic
do?
Chat. Yeah.
You know what? It's it's sporadic. I do have a show next week. Um, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I love doing the show. It's
Hmm.
more of a, do I really need one more thing? Because I'm the minister of a queer group here. Plus, I have another circle, so I have two to run.
Mm,
Plus, I'm a chaplain. Plus, I'm right. I have
that's very busy.
a lot.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
very busy. Absolutely. Well, if people are wanting to at least find out more about you, where can they go? What's the best place?
You can go to my Instagram, Chris Allen, Allaun. I do have a
Mhm.
website. I haven't updated it in a while, but I do have a
Okay.
website, chrisallen.com, and you can
Mhm.
always find me on Facebook, for Chris
Perfect.
Allen, author, teacher, healer.
Perfect. I'll make sure
I
that those
don't
all are
do
down
Twitter
below.
anymore, just so you know. I mean, I'm on there, but
Hmm.
I don't do Twitter because
Hmm.
reasons.
Good reasons. Yep, good reasons.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. I'll make sure that those links are all down in the show notes. And also, at some point, I'm going to do a review of the book too. So I'll be putting that out there, probably not around the time that this comes out, but certainly very soon. In the meantime, I've been Ben Stimson. This has been Chris Allaun, and thank you everybody for watching. And join us next week as I invite somebody else on, maybe Jenna Tellendrew, maybe Devin Hunter. We're really getting down to the bottom of the not the bottom of the barrel. That's horrible to say. We're getting down to the end of the season, and so those are the two left. I have to work with still. So either way, it'll be somebody. And everybody have a wonderful night.